Well, good evening, folks. How was your day? Hope it was a good one. My day's about over, as usual. Last minute doing my video. But anyway, take off from where we left off last night. The second time, I had gone back to school. I was just plain set financially for it. Every quarter, I ended up with $400 and some cash on top of my tuition. My wife had a full-time staff job. I had half my tuition paid just automatically. And then of course, we left because she got sick. We left for the summer, supposedly. Ended up going back down and getting our stuff. And I didn't make it back to school until 91. That was early summer of 83 when I left. Well, we went back in the fall and got our stuff. But I went to work. Instead of go back to school, I went to work at Alaska. And Jonah's ship sunk again. Anyway, we came back down from Alaska to Washington State, to the battleground area, Vancouver area, just over the river from Portland into Oregon. And that's where I had spent my first 5 years. I had a lot of family in that area, and I had met a friend up there in Alaska, and I ended up renting his house, which he kind of had used for a shop. Excuse me, my eye was just itching there, so we rented that, cleaned it all up, rented that for a while. Then we moved into the school housing where my wife was working as the custodial person in charge of the custodial work there, and the kids worked, some of their tuition off. But anyway, I lived there. I went to work in Woodland, Washington, hauling logs. And I worked there for 7 years. Until the fall of, almost the fall of, when I came there in 84, and I left in the fall of 91. And I don't know if I'd have ever left, except as every other place that I had worked, something was, going wrong. I've explained to you, I thought the grass was really green, and these guys were telling me how green the grass had been. But anyway, it was a good job. I loved the job. But they decided, the spotted owl was kind of taking over the logging and stuff. And so it was harder and harder. The competition was getting more and more. And the old man told me, he says, I'm making more in 1 month up in Alaska than I make all year down here. He had sent some of the trucks up there, the older trucks, and so they had a logging camp up there. And so he decided to move the whole outfit up there and just shut down. Well, he wasn't the only one. There was over 100 jobs lost in the trucking in that area. And that's probably putting it very, very mildly that year. Just a lot of the big companies that had been going for 30 years or 40 years were just shutting down because, and that spotted owl thing was a hoax in the first place. They said they could only live in the old growth redwood. Well, some of the people went up there and built they called them little condominiums. Next spring, they went up there, and all these baby owls are poking their heads out of the condominiums. But they can only live in old growth redwood. Yeah, but it worked. The environment, I'm not against protecting the environment, but I'm against this ridiculous overreaction that these fanatics have. That's the only thing I have wrong with it. But anyway, what am I going to do? Well, I had gone down to a camp meeting. We'd taken my vacation every year, going to the camp meeting where I grew up for the church denomination. And while I was there, this little voice said to me, "You've wasted all these years. Go back to school again." Well, I decided that'd be good, but I would go back to school part-time and, and stay living where I was. My wife had a job and, I could travel back and forth to this college, but none of that seemed to be working out, and I had told my wife, I says, it's late enough now that, even if I had 100 men to help me, I wouldn't go back to school this year. It'd be just too hard. Well, my wife had asked me, well, shall I apply for a job and see? And I thought to myself, well, it's so late now, there's no way she's going to get a job. She come back out and told me they want me there last week. She had a job as the supper cook at the college. And they wanted her there as ASP. So there we were. We had to go back. We found some friends that would move in and take over the rent and let us leave a lot of our stuff right there for the time being. And I had about 19 or 17 old cars in the yard. I was back into old cars there too. And I had complaints from the neighbors. They didn't like them. I had them all stashed neatly and kept them mowed around them and everything. But some people just don't like it when they see old cars. So I had to move those cars by a certain time. Well, I got a stay on it for a little bit. And we loaded up and drove just about all night to get down to the college. We had to move into an apartment complex, but we hadn't even got put away. And the guy that was leaving, they had a duplex, really nice duplex, called it student housing. So we got that because she was staff. Actually, that was staff housing. And the very next week, before we started getting a lot of heavy assignments, we headed up to Washington State and got another load of stuff. Got the rest of our things, and the cars and stuff were still there. And then Thanksgiving time, my brother and I went up. He was off work because he had fallen out of a redwood tree. The strap broke when he was up it. And so he was off work because he had steel rods and stuff in his back. So we went up and we spent 24 hours hauling those cars over to my cousin's place. And got that all taken care of. And then later that spring, I went up and got rid of a lot of them. But here we were. She had this job as staff. On my tuition, I didn't even have to work because what happened is they had timber. They were shutting down, so I was eligible. That's what the guys told me. He said, "Hey, you got to go back to school. If you're going back to school, have them lay you off," because they had already decided as each job was finished. They had several logging outfits, the same company. That's why they had all these trucks, because they had 2 or 3 logging setups. And they said as each job is finished, they're going to lay guys off. Well, I had enough seniority, I could have worked till the last. But they said, have them lay you off with the first group and you'd be eligible for temporary training benefits, which took me clear through my spring quarter. I didn't even have to work that year. I just asked them, well, lay me off. I'm going back to school, and that way I can get off in time to go to school. And so it worked. I got laid off. I went back to school, and I graduated in 1991 at the age of 46 years old, 46 and a half years old. Spent the next 17 years in the ministry until I had to leave. And then spent a couple of years waiting for my post-traumatic stress disorder disability. I got the wrong people working for me to start with. I knew what the trouble was. I read a pamphlet that was like reading about me. And so here I am today, still looking for ways to make money. And I found it. Click the link below and you'll find it too. I hope you don't procrastinate too late. Sure, I'll benefit too, but I won't benefit as much as you will. I'll benefit one time if you did, but then you're the one that's going to have a life change just like me. And I believe you'd be just like me, happy you did it. Anyway, click the button below and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.